When you walk into a place like the British Museum or the Met, you're told you're entering a place of learning, culture, and history. But the truth is, these aren't just archives, they're monuments to conquest, and the stories they tell, sanitized for comfort. At the center of it all is what's known as the Universal Museum Model. It's the idea that cultural objects from across the globe can be held in one place for the benefit of all humanity. But let's be honest, this model wasn't born from generosity. It was born from empire. As scholar Nicholas Mirzoff puts it, museums function as colonial technologies. They weren't built to preserve, but they were built to organize the world so that Europe came out on top. Walk the galleries and you'll see it, the ladder of civilization, the whiteness neatly placed at the summit. And here's the kicker. Even now, those institutions still cling to this logic. Take the British Museum. Its refusal to return the Pantheon sculptures rests on a simple move. Declare the objects no longer part of Greece's story, but Britain's. That's the game, isn't it? Strip an object of its context, reframe it, and claim it as universal. That's not preservation. That's custody without consent. Now, defenders will say, but museums keep these items safe. They protect them from conflict or instability. Sure, but that argument assumes the original communities don't do that themselves. And that conveniently forgets how many of those regions were destabilized by the very same colonial powers now claiming to protect their culture. That's like stealing someone's family photo album, then insisting you're the best person to keep it from getting damaged. So what's the alternative? One answer is epistemic sovereignty, returning not just the objects, but the authority to interpret them. Historian Philip Deloria describes how the National Museum of the American Indian uses pods, tribally curated, non-linear installations that reflect indigenous worldviews, not Western timelines. Some visitors find that confusing, and maybe that confusion is useful. Maybe it means the institution isn't speaking for everyone anymore. Curator Tanya Autry makes it plain. Museums are not neutral. The idea of neutrality is a shield. It hides the anti-blackness, white supremacy, and extractive hierarchies that built these institutions, and still runs through their boardrooms and back offices. We need to talk about labor, because museums don't just extract culture, they extract labor too. Front of house roles, guards, educators, visitor service are often held by people of color. But decisions, funding, influence, that stays with donors, many of whom made their fortunes in oil, real estate, or finance. A New York Times investigation found that nearly 40% of board members at major US museums come from finance. These people don't just write checks, they shape the stories. So when institutions talk about diversity, but still answer to billionaire trustees, that's not decolonization. That's branding. That's why many scholars and activists argue the Universal Museum model doesn't need tweaking. It needs to be abolished. And no, that doesn't mean burning museums to the ground. It means letting go of the idea that one institution, shaped by an empire, can speak for all cultures. So, what takes its place? We can't just critique museums for being colonial. If we're serious about dismantling a system that upholds white supremacy and colonial power, we need to focus on what comes next. The Universal Museum model wasn't just built through extraction, it's maintained through ongoing control of interpretation, of labor, and of legitimacy. So any real solution has to take that control apart and put it back in the hands of the people museums were never designed to serve. Here are 3 strategies that can begin that process. First, embedded epistemic sovereignty into every level of museum practice. That means returning control over meaning and not just returning objects. Interpretive power is one of the most tightly guarded forms of authority in museums. Labels, wall text, exhibit designs, these things tell audiences what to think, how to see, and whose knowledge counts. In the Universal Museum, that power is concentrated in the hands of curators who are often institutionally trained, elite, and disconnected from the cultures they interpret. We need a different model, one in which indigenous, African, and colonialized communities can decide how their own histories and cultural materials are presented. That could look like community-led exhibits, rotating stewardship, or co-curation with tribal governments and diasporic networks. It might mean recontextualizing displays or removing them entirely. The goal isn't inclusion in the current structure, it's control over the structure itself. Second, make repatriation the default, not the exception. Right now, most institutions approach restorations like damage control, selective, slow, and framed as generosity. Returning stolen or looted objects should be the baseline ethical responsibility, not a PR opportunity. That means museums need to proactively identify contested items, build transparent public databases, and dedicate real resources to supporting repatriation, not just in legal terms, but logistically and financially. It also means being willing to let go of star objects that were never ethically acquired in the first place, no matter how central they've become to an institution's identity. If decolonization is ever going to mean anything, it has to cost something. And that cost starts with ownership. Third, decolonize institutional labor. Museums don't just reproduce colonialism through what they show, they reproduce it through how they operate. The people who staff front desks, install exhibitions, teach school groups, and maintain security are often BIPOC and working class, and are often excluded from decision making. Meanwhile, curatorial authority and executive power remain concentrated at the top, along with donor influence, generational wealth, and elite credentials. This isn't just a diversity issue, it's a structural hierarchy designed to protect status, not share it. We need to radically rethink what museum labor looks like. That includes paying interns, abolishing unpaid entry points, unionizing staff, and prioritizing community hires with lived experience. It means flattening curatorial hierarchies and investing in leadership pipelines that reflect the public these institutions claim to serve. And it means recognizing that the people closest to the harm are also the closest to the knowledge. Because if museums only shift what's on the walls, but not who gets to decide, they haven't changed. They've just rebranded. A real-world example of a community-led institution is the Zuni Museum in New Mexico, a space that's entirely run by the Zuni people. No glass cases, no outsider captions, no neutral tones, just lived culture, spoken in its own voice. This is what it looks like when cultural care replaces institutional control. This kind of transformation is what Autry calls wake work, the outgoing labor of reckoning, resisting, and rebuilding. It's not symbolic, it's structural. It's about changing not just what's in the gallery, but who decides what belongs there in the first place. Mirzoff calls it emptying the museum, not of objects, but of the colonial scaffolding, the funding pipelines, the authority hierarchies, the myth of universality. Because the museum system isn't timeless. It's not neutral, it's not inevitable. It's a system built to serve empire, and we don't have to keep it. Museums can be a place of repair, places of truth, but only if they stop pretending to be everything for everyone, and start listening to people they've spoken over for centuries. Not for prestige, not for profit, but for justice.